Morning, everybody. I've known Jonathan for quite a long time now. Not as long as Claire has. Claire's at the back of the room, by the way, Claire McKeown. I never forget meeting Jonathan with Dr. Paisley and Martin McGuinness when I first came here in 2000. And I think it was probably just after the executive was re-established. And as you probably know, Dr. Paisley didn't necessarily believe in climate change, but I think he did realize that Jonathan was an extraordinary human being, and Jonathan's probably influenced me in many ways. There are a few people in my life who I've met who've had a big impact, and Jonathan is one of them. So it's a huge honor to follow Jonathan, and I'm really sorry, Jonathan, you're not here. Strangely, when Kevin dragooned me into speaking today, he said, "What are you going to title this talk?" And I said, "We're all in it together. We're all in this together." And in Jonathan's extraordinary book, wonderful book, Hope and Hell, the last section of the book is called All in It Together. And obviously, in our lives, we all have different motivations, but COVID has done something to us. It's been pretty rough for many of us. It's really stopped us in our tracks to think about what world we want to live in and what world we'd like our children to live in. And I'm fearful that already we're losing our way in such a short period of time as we get back to a norm. So we do have a unique opportunity to do something dramatically different. And in relation to the question that you asked, Kevin, I think it is important that when we leave here today, each of us try a little bit harder to do something significantly different. When my parents used to go out, I grew up in Wicklow, and I've always had a sweet tooth. And for anybody who has done this, you might understand it. But I used to adore icing sugar. I could eat half a packet of icing sugar. I mean, it was just horrible. And I grew up, and I was born in Africa. And in Africa, you had to have most of your stuff in tins. So between the carnation milk, which is just unbelievably good for fudge, but it's also good on its own, between those two. So that's a shot of weighing scales. One of the interesting benefits of COVID was I exercised every morning. You'll see later on, we have quite a busy household. So for me, sanity was to get out for a run in the morning, and I was just above, I was actually close to 13.5 stone, and I managed to get myself for the first time in a very long time down to nearly 12 stone. So that's what that is. And obviously measuring your weight every day is incredibly fulfilling when it's going the right way, and it's not so fulfilling when it's going the wrong way. And I think that's pretty important when we come to judging carbon in our atmosphere. So for me, my sugar intake, my eating intake, and what I do to keep that under control, I think we have to apply a discipline. And it is a discipline. And we're only going to do this if we become incredibly disciplined and we measure. So one of the other people that I have been lucky enough to meet, I knew the President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, as a child. And for those of you who have not read her book, Climate Justice, it's a fantastic book. And in the book, she identifies that to win the war of climate change, it will be largely women that do this. It's a very powerful book. And in the book, she identified the lady to my right, Christiana Figueres. And I decided before lockdown, so we're going back to 2019, that the CBI have an annual conference in London, which is incredibly well attended, almost as well attended as this event, that it was in person, that I would like Christiana Figueres to address the business community. So with Claire's help and a couple of other people's help, I wrote to her and persuaded her to come to London. So I've also met Christiana Figueres. The two other ladies in there are to my left, Rachel Carson. Rachel Carson is somebody who I only came across as a result of my work going to America. And I went for a run in Washington when I was given accommodation by the wonderful late Norman Houston. I went through a woods, and there was a dedication to Rachel Carson in a wood. And for those of you who have not come across her, she was formidable. Most wonderful, extraordinary human being, as is Jane Goodall. So there's one other woman who I haven't included there, and I just mentioned her in passing, the president of the Institution of Civil Engineers. I'm a fellow of the Civil Engineers. Her name's Rachel Skinner. She's just produced yesterday the second video on climate change, and I'd encourage you to read that, hear it, listen to it, because it's brilliant. It's incredibly powerful. So that's heaven. Down below, below that liminal line is hell. And hell is those people who sat in front of a congressional committee telling the world, and they're all men, telling the world that nicotine is not addictive. So make no mistake, we're living in a world, and there is a problem here, because we're still living in a world where people don't want to accept carbon, the dangers of carbon and climate change. I could go on, but I won't. So I like diagrams. Arup, one of the leading consulting engineers in the world, have done a lot of work in this space. And to me, this pyramid is a fantastic pyramid of simplicity. But also, coupled with it is this chart, which is the Sustainable Development Goals here. And I love the way this is classified, because it's quite difficult to sometimes fathom how you apportion the 16 Sustainable Development Goals and the importance of them, because each of them are important, and each of them are fundamental to how we approach the future of the planet, our humanity, and our biodiversity. So again, I leave you with that for further thinking and reflection. And each of us have an opportunity to put some effort into different parts of that equation. And I think that's the challenge for us all, is to identify which niche we want to play a part in to change the world we're living in. I'm obsessed by nitrogen dioxide and the fact that too many of us still drive our children to school. Nitrogen dioxide destroys children's brains. And if any of us think we're tackling climate change at this minute, just look at this recent graph by the World Health Organization. This is a combination of carbon and the 10 worst cities and the 10 best cities. I'm sorry, it's quite difficult to see. I can get you the details, but it's on the FT article if you can get the FT, or look at World Health Organization. But these are facing us day in, day out. And there are almost no cities that are meeting the new thresholds for carbon dioxide emissions and nitrogen dioxide emissions. But here's the great thing. The great thing is that cities are changing. I haven't been to Milan for many years, so I haven't seen this incredible building, which, by the way, is what they're trying to do with the Grenfell Tower in London, and hopefully they will. But this is the Bosco Verticale. And I have to say, and I'm not going to look too close, but I will look at that table over there, maybe. I think it's time we stopped building boxes and we started to build beautiful buildings in Belfast again, because it isn't good enough that we're building buildings that have they just don't look right. That is a building that looks right to me. It feels right. It feels a building of our time. And in the middle, the other building is a building that has been completed in Belfast that is meeting the best standards. And that's really promising, really, really promising. So just in terms of my life, I think we have a real opportunity to live in cities and create an incredible sense of urban harmony. So at the moment, we're living in the middle of Belfast. My wife has a restaurant, which is 2 minutes walk. My office is 2 minutes walk, and almost all the children go nearby. This is a beautiful picture of County Down. When I left the SIB, I was given this picture, which I'd seen originally in a newspaper, and this was growing flax. I'm working on a project which is potentially growing hemp. Climate change is full of opportunity. Hemp is one of the most exciting materials that we can use in almost every part of our lives, including substitution for concrete and steel. I'm also, at a very early stage, looking at the potential for mobile wind turbines on Loch Ness. And for those of you who probably hear about one of my DARF projects, I believe fundamentally in a rapid train, high-speed train between Belfast and Dublin. This is a hydrogen train, which only goes 160 kilometers an hour, sadly. I would like to do it in half an hour, and I think it's a huge environmental opportunity. Just in my final closing, if you want an inspirational person to look at who's transforming the world here on the island of Ireland, look up Norman Crowley and his global business, Crowley Carbon. He also has an amazing electric car business, selling incredible cars. He put out this little thing on Twitter, which I adore. We are all going to fail. We are all going to fail. We need to get used to it. But if we don't make attempts, we have to make many attempts. So that's, to me, the story of the future. This is my family. So there's 8 kids there, and my wife's grandchild. So 3, my wife was married before. Jonathan, I think, I don't know if you're listening, Jonathan, but you may recollect that once you reprimanded me when I think we had 6 children in our house. So I'm afraid it's a failure. But as you can see, they're beautiful, and they're important, and they're vital. And yes, at one level, I have gone against some of the good principles of sustainability, but I do fundamentally believe. And the youngest there is sitting on the bench. And there he is on his way to school. And poor little boy, I shoved him in front of Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin was born in Belfast nearly 200 years ago. And for those of you who do know, Kelvin and centigrade are connected. So we have to measure everything. It is fundamental we have measurements in place. And the great thing is, my little boy Ezekiel understands what Kelvin's about and the importance of what we're doing to our planet. Claire reprimanded me in my closing one that I need to be inspiring and go for hope rather than fear and doom. So, as Jonathan quite rightly identified in his book, hope is everything. Without hope, what are we going to do? All I'd say to you, ladies and gentlemen, is if you listen to Rachel Skinner and you listen and read the final bit of Jonathan's, we haven't got any more time. If we have not moved this significantly, as Sir David King has said, by 2025, so that's the 3.5 years since Jonathan was last here, if we have not moved this by then, it's over. It's over. There's no more time. So please, ladies and gentlemen, choose your niche, make it happen. Thank you.